Help us hit our first 1,000 subscribers. Your support drives us to create even more wonderful stories. Thanks for being part of our journey. I always thought I had my life figured out. Not perfect, I was never rich, never the most charming guy in the room. But I worked hard, paid my bills, stayed loyal. I believed that if you gave love, you'd get love back. And for a while, it felt like I was right. Sarah and I had been married for almost a decade. We met at a friend's wedding in Chicago. I still remember the way she walked into the room, owning every second of attention without even trying. She wore this flowing red dress, the kind that makes men lose their train of thought. I was just some guy in a wrinkled suit, barely scraping by in life, but when she smiled at me, I felt like the luckiest man in the world. She made me believe in things I thought were just fairy tales. Soulmates, fate, love that lasts a lifetime. Looking back, maybe I was just desperate to believe in something good. I worked 2 jobs to afford her engagement ring. Days in a warehouse, hauling boxes that felt heavier every shift. Nights at a gas station, watching the clock tick by, my hands aching from exhaustion. I barely slept, barely lived, but I never complained, because I told myself, she's worth it. She was my everything, my anchor, my reason to keep pushing forward, even when life felt unbearable. But now, as I sit here in the darkness of our half-empty bedroom, staring at the cold sheets beside me, I wonder if I was ever anything to her at all. I didn't know it back then, but behind that sweet smile, the good wife act, she was hiding something that would destroy me, piece by piece. They say hindsight is 20/20, but I wish I had been blind. Looking back, I should have seen the signs. The little things that didn't add up. The small inconsistencies in her words. The sudden changes in her behavior. But when you love someone, you don't look for the cracks. You convince yourself that the foundation is strong. First, it was nothing. Just subtle shifts. Sarah used to be glued to her phone when we were together, laughing at stupid memes and sending me texts even when I was just in the other room. But then one day, she started turning her phone face down. At dinner, she'd get a notification, glance at it, and quickly swipe it away. I'd ask, "Who was that?" And she'd smile, shake her head. Just work stuff. And I believed her. Then, there were the nights she came home late. At first, it was once in a while, a big project at work, an office party I wasn't invited to. But then it became a pattern. I'd be sitting on the couch, watching some rerun on TV, waiting for the sound of her key in the door. But it wouldn't come. Not for hours. One night, I fell asleep waiting. I woke up at 2 a.m. to find her just stepping inside, smelling like perfume that wasn't hers and cheap red wine. I laughed it off. Rough night. She forced a smile. Yeah, the girls kept ordering drinks. I should have asked more questions. I should have paid attention to the way she hesitated before answering, the way she avoided my eyes. But I didn't, because I wanted to believe my wife loved me as much as I loved her. And so, I did what any fool in love would do. I ignored the sinking feeling in my gut. I told myself she was just stressed, that she was working too hard, that maybe I wasn't giving her enough attention. But deep down, I knew. I just wasn't ready to admit it yet. Doubt is like a slow poison. It starts with a whisper, quiet, ignorable. But then it grows, festers, until it's all you can hear. I tried to push the thoughts away, convincing myself that I was just being paranoid, that I was overthinking. But the cracks in our marriage were no longer small. They were gaping holes, and I was falling right through them. Sarah had always been affectionate, the kind of woman who would run her fingers through my hair when I sat on the couch, who would lean in for a kiss even if I was just passing her in the hallway. But now she flinched when I touched her. Not dramatically, no gasps, no pulling away in horror. Just small things. The way she'd tense if I put my hand on her waist. The way her kisses became quick, barely there. The way she avoided meeting my eyes for too long. And the intimacy, gone. At first, she blamed stress. Work has been exhausting, babe. I just need some time to unwind. So I gave her space. Then it was headaches. Then exhaustion. Then nothing at all. Just quiet rejection, night after night, until I stopped trying altogether. The bed felt colder, and so did I. But what really made my stomach turn was the way she suddenly became obsessed with her appearance again. I still remember the night I caught her standing in front of the mirror, applying lipstick at 10 p.m. She never wore makeup for me anymore. "Where are you going?" I asked, trying to sound casual. She hesitated, then smiled. That same practice smile I was beginning to hate. "Oh, nowhere. Just felt like dressing up a little." But I knew better. She wasn't dressing up for me. She was dressing up for someone else. And the worst part? I wasn't even sure if I wanted to know who. A man can only ignore the truth for so long. He can pretend. He can rationalize. He can force himself to believe in something that doesn't exist anymore. But deep down, in the quiet moments, when the world slows down and there's no one left to lie to, he knows. And I knew. Sarah had changed. I wasn't sure when it started. Maybe it was gradual, like a slow-moving disease, infecting every part of our marriage until it became unrecognizable. Or maybe it was always there, hiding beneath the surface, waiting for the right moment to strike. But one thing was certain. She wasn't mine anymore. That night, she came home late. Again. She used to text me, let me know if she was running behind. Lately, I was lucky to even get a half-hearted excuse. "Work ran late," she muttered, tossing her purse onto the counter. I looked at her, really looked at her. Her hair was tousled, lips slightly smudged, perfume heavier than usual. "Work," I repeated, my voice tighter than I intended. Her eyes flickered, just for a second. "Yeah." Silence stretched between us, heavy, suffocating. I wanted to believe her. God, I wanted to believe her so badly. But then her phone buzzed. She grabbed it faster than I had ever seen her move. Her fingers curled around it, turning the screen away from me, and suddenly, I felt like I was standing on the edge of a cliff, staring down into the abyss. "Who was that?" I asked, forcing my voice to stay calm. "Just a work email," she said too quickly, too rehearsed. I took a deep breath, pushing down the nausea rising in my gut. "Let me see." She hesitated. That was all it took. The hesitation. The single, tiny pause that shattered whatever was left of my trust. "It's nothing," she insisted, stepping back. "Jesus, why are you acting like this?" I didn't answer. I just walked past her, into the bedroom, closing the door behind me, because I finally understood something. Sarah wasn't just lying to me. She was lying to herself. I didn't sleep that night. I laid there, staring at the ceiling while Sarah breathed evenly beside me, as if nothing had happened, as if she didn't just lie to my face, as if she wasn't clutching her phone like it was a lifeline to a world I wasn't a part of. I wanted to believe I was overthinking, that it was just stress, paranoia, exhaustion, but the gut doesn't lie. My chest felt like it was caving in. My mind kept spinning with questions I couldn't answer. The next morning, she was humming in the kitchen, flipping pancakes like we were a perfect couple from some Sunday morning TV show. She kissed me on the cheek, said "love you," like she always did, but it was hollow, robotic. So I did something I never thought I'd do. I waited for her to leave. Then I opened her laptop. I wasn't proud of it. Still not. But I was a man drowning, and I needed truth like air. First, nothing. Just emails, grocery lists, a Pinterest board for bathroom remodels. But then I found it. A folder hidden deep in her cloud drive. Dozens of photos. Him and her. At a bar. At the beach. At what looked like a hotel room. Her smile in those photos. It wasn't the smile she gave me anymore. And there was a video. I shouldn't have clicked it. God knows I shouldn't have. But I did. Her voice. Laughing. Moaning. Whispering things she never whispered to me. It felt like someone drove a railroad spike straight through my chest. Couldn't breathe. Couldn't cry. Couldn't scream. Just sat there. Frozen. The woman I built my world around. She wasn't mine anymore. Maybe she never really was. And in that moment, I wasn't just heartbroken. I was erased. Every sacrifice. Every long night. Every scar on my hands from working 2 jobs just to keep us afloat. It meant nothing. She chose someone else. And that's when something in me broke. Not like a man crying. No, like a man burning. The next few days were silent chaos. I didn't confront her, not yet. Couldn't. I didn't know how. I walked through the house like a ghost, going through the motions while my insides were turning to ash. She kept smiling, kept texting, kept humming. I kept dying inside. Every little thing she did now felt like a performance. I began to see the patterns. The nights she'd say she was too tired. The sudden work dinners she never mentioned before. The way she'd laugh at her phone and quickly turn the screen. And then the worst part? She started being nicer. She'd bring home my favorite snacks, rub my shoulders while I watched TV. She even suggested we plan a little weekend getaway. Just the two of us, she said, like she wanted to reset something, like she felt guilty but not enough to stop. And I sat there, smiling back, pretending to believe her, when every time she touched me, I felt sick, because I knew where those hands had been. I started recording things, backing up her messages, saving photos. I wasn't just a husband anymore. I was building a case. But all the while, my soul was cracking. I'd lie in bed at night, staring at the back of her head, wondering how many lies could fit into a single woman's mouth, wondering how long she had been planning this, how long I'd been the fool. I skipped meals, couldn't work, could barely breathe without feeling like I was suffocating on betrayal. And still, she smiled. Still, she kissed me goodnight. Still, she looked me in the eyes and said, "I love you." I used to believe that phrase could heal anything. Now it just felt like a knife, twisting deeper each time. There's only so much pain a man can swallow before it turns into something else. I had spent weeks pretending, smiling, sleeping beside a woman I no longer recognized. My heart was exhausted. My mind was in knots. And my soul felt like it had been left out in the rain, soaking wet and forgotten. But that night, something snapped. It was a Saturday. She said she was going shopping with friends. Same excuse she'd used before. I nodded, kissed her on the cheek, watched her walk out the door in a tight black dress she never wore for me anymore. And I didn't follow her this time. I didn't need to. Instead, I poured myself a cheap glass of whiskey and sat in the dark living room, staring at the TV that wasn't even turned on, just thinking, just burning. An hour passed, then another, and then my phone buzzed. A message from a mutual friend. Picture her sitting at a cozy restaurant, laughing across the table, holding hands with a man I didn't recognize but instantly hated. That was it. My hand tightened around the glass until it cracked. You see, I had tried to be the bigger man. I had tried to understand, tried to hope this was all a mistake, a phase, something that could be fixed. But what she gave me, what she left me with, was humiliation, loneliness, years of sacrifice crushed under the heel of her betrayal. And in that moment, not out of rage but clarity, I decided something. I wouldn't be the victim anymore. No more waiting, no more hoping. If she wanted a war, she'd get one. I didn't sleep that night, not even a minute. I sat in that dimly lit living room, the whiskey bottle half empty, my thoughts sharper than they'd ever been. For once, my mind wasn't fogged by sadness or confusion. It was focused, crystal clear. I knew exactly what I had to do. And no, it wasn't violence. That's not who I am. But I was done being the fool, the backup plan, the man who paid the bills while someone else got the smiles. She came home at 2:17 a.m. I remember the time because I was staring at the clock when the door clicked. She smelled like expensive cologne, not mine. Her hair was messy in a way it never was when she went shopping. And when I looked into her eyes, she didn't even flinch.
No guilt.
No fear. Just a calm little smile, like I was too dumb to see it. That smile broke something in me, but I still didn't yell. I didn't accuse. I just nodded. "Did you have fun?" I asked, my voice flat. She blinked, hesitated, then gave a half smirk and said, "You know, just a girl's night."
I'm tired.
And she walked past me like I was furniture. That was the moment I realized. She didn't even respect me enough to lie properly. I was beneath her now in her mind, just the man who pays for the roof over her head, the one who'd never leave, never speak up, never fight back. She thought I was weak, but she had no idea what was coming. I started planning the next day, not just how to leave her, but how to leave her with nothing. Because if she thought she could build her little fantasy life off the back of my loyalty and sacrifices, she had another thing coming. This wouldn't just be the end of our marriage. It would be the end of her comfort, her safety. Her lies were about to cost her everything. She had no idea what I was doing behind the scenes. While she smiled in selfies, pretending to be the perfect wife, I was gathering everything: emails, bank statements, credit card charges, hotel records. I kept quiet, pretended to be the same tired, broken man she thought she could walk all over. But inside I was boiling and planning. Every moment of silence was a setup. Every yes, honey, was a step toward justice. I contacted a divorce lawyer. Not just any lawyer, one of the best in the state. Cost me most of my savings, but I didn't care. This wasn't just about leaving her. This was about exposing her, making her feel what I felt. Not just betrayal, but powerlessness. Turns out, she'd used my name to open credit lines I never knew about, put debts under my social, maxed out cards while I worked night shifts and packed lunches in brown paper bags. She wasn't just cheating with her body. She was stealing my life. But the lawyer was sharp, very sharp. She said, "We can play this slow. Build a case that will leave her no leg to stand on. If you want revenge, this is how it's done." Quiet, legal, and devastating. I felt something inside me flicker. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't just a victim drowning in heartbreak. I was a man with a mission, a man who was going to take his life back. So while she laughed on the phone with her girls, while she twirled her hair and disappeared for the weekend, I waited and waited because I knew her fall was coming, and I would be the one holding the mirror when it did. The day of the court hearing, she walked in wearing white, as if that could wash away everything she'd done. She smiled like she still held all the cards. But the moment my lawyer started laying out the evidence, her face changed. First the hotel bills, then the secret credit cards, then the messages to him, and finally the signed affidavit from our neighbor, the one who saw them sneaking into our house while I was on the night shift. Her smile cracked like glass. The judge didn't even blink. She lost everything: the house, the spousal support, her perfect image. And when the final gavel hit, I felt this quiet, heavy peace settle in my chest. It wasn't joy. It wasn't victory. It was justice. I didn't jump up or cheer. I just stood there, breathing for the first time in months. I walked out of that courtroom lighter, straighter, not because I won something, but because I let go of something that was never real to begin with. Later that night, I sat on the same old couch in my tiny apartment, still broke, still tired, still rebuilding, but finally free. I poured a glass of cheap whiskey and looked out the window. The city lights didn't seem as cold that night. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel alone. I wasn't the man she broke. I was the man who got back up and made sure she watched every second of it. Help us hit our first 1,000 subscribers. Your support drives us to create even more wonderful stories. Thanks for being part of our journey. I always thought I was doing everything right, not perfect. Never had the sharpest suit or the flashiest car. But I showed up every single day. I worked long hours at the auto shop, came home covered in grease, and still made time to kiss my wife on the forehead and ask her how her day went. Her name was Emily. She used to call me her rock. Said I made her feel safe in a world that never did. And maybe that's what I clung to the most. That somehow, despite all the noise and chaos, I could be someone's calm, someone's home. Money was always tight. We skipped vacations. We counted coupons. I'd lie awake at night staring at the ceiling, wondering how I'd pay the electric bill. But every morning, I'd get up before the sun, lace my old boots, and remind myself, this is what love looks like, dash. I thought she saw that too, until the morning I found the envelope. It was sitting by the coffee pot, stained on the corner like it had been there a while. just a plain white envelope with my name scribbled across it in Emily's handwriting. I opened it without thinking. Inside were divorce papers. No explanation, no note. Just the cold, stamped reality that the woman I gave my world to was walking away without a single word. My knees buckled. I had to grab the kitchen counter to keep myself upright. My hands, the same hands that fixed her broken sink, massaged her tired shoulders, held her through her panic attacks, were trembling. I called her straight to voicemail. I texted nothing. Felt like a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. And the worst part? Deep down, a part of me already knew. There had been signs, subtle shifts. The way she flinched when I touched her, the locked phone, the sudden late work meetings, but I didn't want to believe them, because when you've spent your whole life convincing yourself you're finally enough, finally loved, admitting it was all a lie, that breaks something inside you, something that doesn't grow back the same. At first, it was small things, the kind of things you try to ignore because you want to believe you're just imagining them. Late night texts she wouldn't explain. Quiet phone calls she'd take in the hallway. Her suddenly locking her phone when she never used to. And the smell of cologne on her coat that definitely wasn't mine. I told myself I was overthinking, that maybe I was just tired, working overtime, skipping meals, fighting off another headache. I didn't want to be that paranoid husband. The guy who accused his wife because he was insecure, but something inside me, something deep, like a cold whisper in my bones, told me something was off. And Sarah, she started pulling away. Her eyes didn't light up when I walked through the door anymore. Her hugs felt shorter, her kisses colder. She started going out more, girls' nights, work dinners, even weekend retreats. And me? I was always the one watching the kids, heating leftovers, trying not to count the hours she was gone. One night, I asked her, gently, if everything was okay. She just smiled that practice smile and said, "You're overthinking again. Maybe get some rest, babe." Maybe I should have stopped right there. Maybe I should have trusted her. But my gut, it was screaming. And when you've spent your whole life being lied to, used, overlooked, that scream becomes something you can't ignore. I started watching, not spying, not yet, but noticing, writing things down, dates, times, excuses. It felt sick. It felt wrong. But worse than that, it felt necessary, because the woman I gave my soul to was slowly becoming a stranger, and I had no idea what she was hiding. It was a Thursday. Rain was tapping gently on the kitchen window, and the house felt oddly quiet. The kind of quiet that doesn't bring peace, but pressure. I came home early from work. Not on purpose. My shift at the warehouse was cut short because machines broke down again. No pay for the lost hours, of course. Another hit to the bank account. I remember walking through the door and calling out, "I'm home." No answer. The living room lights were off, TV silent. Just the faint sound of her voice, Sarah's voice, coming from upstairs. It wasn't loud, but it wasn't the kind of voice you use on a work call either. It was soft, laughing, flirty. I froze. I wanted to believe she was on the phone with her sister, or watching a movie, or anything normal, but my gut clenched again, the same way it had been doing more and more lately. I walked up the stairs slowly, step by step, like I was climbing toward a truth I didn't want to find. The bedroom door was cracked open, just enough to hear her say, "Stop it, you're gonna get me in trouble. He could be home any minute." My heart sank. It actually hurt, like my chest was being pulled in on itself. She was pacing the room, phone to her ear, giggling like a teenager. That bright, sparkly voice I hadn't heard directed at me in months. I didn't barge in. I didn't yell. I just turned around, walked back downstairs, and sat in the dark. I didn't cry. Not yet. I didn't scream. Not yet. I just sat there. A man sinking deeper into a storm, knowing the roof was about to collapse, and still trying to pretend maybe it wouldn't. And that night, when she came down all smiles, asking me if I'd like to watch something on Netflix together, I nodded. I smiled. I pretended everything was okay, because I wasn't ready. Not yet. But I knew something was breaking. After that night, everything changed. Even if I pretended it hadn't. Sarah didn't know I heard her. She smiled the next morning. made coffee like nothing happened, said she had a girls' lunch with coworkers. I just nodded, but inside, something in me was done pretending. I wasn't crazy, I wasn't jealous, I was tired of being made the fool. That day, I skipped work, risked getting fired, but I needed answers more than I needed the paycheck. I waited until she left, then I opened her laptop. It was locked. Of course, she had never locked her laptop before. I stared at the password screen, hands shaking. I tried her birthday. Didn't work. Our anniversary. Didn't work. Then, I tried his name. Jake. Jake was her coworker from the hospital. The one she said was married, with 2 kids. The one she once laughed too loud with on speakerphone. The password worked. And what I saw, I swear, I wish I hadn't looked. There were emails. So many emails. Hidden in a folder called Insurance Logs-Clever. Right? Some were short, flirty, but others. I wish you could hold me like you did last night, Dash. He has no idea. Still thinks I'm an angel, Dash. You make me feel alive again. Not like I'm stuck in that cold, silent marriage, Dash. That cold, silent marriage. The one I worked 2 jobs to support. The one where I did the laundry, made dinner, held her hand through every panic attack. My stomach twisted, my chest felt hollow. I slammed the laptop shut and just sat there, staring at the wall, like I was staring straight into the end of my life. But here's the thing. I didn't scream, I didn't call her, I didn't do anything rash. I just sat still, let the pain burn through me like acid, because I knew I was about to become someone else, someone she'd regret betraying. I sat on that couch for hours, maybe longer. The clock ticked. The sun moved across the window, and I didn't move an inch. I kept thinking, was it just emotional? Was it physical? How long had this been going on? Did she love him? Did she ever love me? I knew I couldn't ask her, not yet. If I confronted her too early, she'd cry, blame me for being distant, for working too much. I've seen it before. Not just in movies, but in real life. Men like me, we get gaslight until we question our own reality. So I came up with a plan. I went online and bought a small hidden camera, one of those nanny cams disguised as an air freshener. I placed it in the living room, the room where she took most of her phone calls when she thought I wasn't paying attention. I didn't feel good doing it. It made me feel cheap, pathetic, but you know what felt worse? Being the last person in my own marriage to know the truth. And when I tell you what I saw, it still makes my hands shake. It wasn't just phone calls, it wasn't just flirtation. 2 days after I installed the camera, I came home from a night shift early, pretended I forgot my badge. She wasn't in bed, she wasn't in the shower. She was on the couch, whispering, wearing his hoodie. The one she claimed she accidentally brought from work. He still doesn't know, she said. I feel bad sometimes, but then I think, I deserve this. He never looks at me the way you do, Dash. Never looks at her that way. I used to kiss her forehead when she was asleep just to remind myself how lucky I was. I used to rub her back when she was tired. I noticed every damn thing about her, but now I saw what she truly meant. I wasn't exciting. I was her safety net, her backup plan, her quiet little husband who worked double shifts while she played fantasy with another man. And that was the moment something inside me turned off. Not love, not pain, but fear, the fear of being alone. The fear of starting over. It just disappeared, because I realized something important. I already was alone, she just hadn't told me yet. After that night, something inside me went numb. I still went to work, still came home, still kissed her on the forehead, just like always, but I wasn't really there anymore. It was like I was watching my life from the outside. Watching a man pretending to be married while his soul was quietly packing up and leaving the house. She didn't notice a thing, she laughed like always, smiled at me when she needed something. Sometimes she even kissed me longer than usual, probably out of guilt, but to me, every touch felt fake. Every word like a rehearsed line. I stopped checking the camera footage. I didn't need it anymore. I already knew what I needed now was a plan. That weekend, I told her I was picking up an extra shift. Truth was, I went to my brother Eric's place. He's the kind of guy who never liked Sarah, called her too polished, and said something about her eyes always looking past people. I never listened before now. I was ready to hear everything. When I told him what I'd seen, he didn't look shocked. He didn't say, "I told you so," either he just nodded and said, "So what are you gonna do, man? Cry until she gets bored and leaves? Or finally make her feel the way she made you feel?" I didn't have an answer, but those words stuck with me the whole ride home. And that night, while Sarah lay beside me, texting someone in the dark, probably him, I looked at her and thought, she thinks I'm still the same guy. She thinks I'll take whatever she gives me and call it love, but no, not anymore. Something new was growing in me, not hatred, not violence, but clarity. She broke something in me, and now I was ready to break something in return, but not with yelling, not with fists. I'd take my time, like a man who's been hurt too deep to scream anymore, like a man who finally stopped begging and started thinking. I didn't scream, didn't confront her, didn't even ask her where she was going when she dressed up late Friday night and said she was meeting coworkers for drinks dash. I just smiled and said, "Drive safe dash." And when she was gone, I sat on the couch in complete silence. No TV, no music, just me, and the sound of a clock ticking louder than it ever had before. I stared at the door for a long time, not waiting for her to come back, but thinking how many times I watched her walk through it after being with him. How many times did I kiss lips that had just lied to someone else? How many nights did I beg her for attention while she gave her heart, her body, to a man who didn't even have the guts to face me? That night, I opened a new email account. I created a document, a folder, started tracking things, her texts, her calls, receipts, changes in perfume, the way she suddenly took more care of her appearance. But not for me. I wasn't collecting proof for divorce. I was collecting truth for myself, because if I was going to walk away from the only woman I ever loved, I needed to know I wasn't crazy, that I wasn't just some insecure guy overthinking his marriage. And still, every night she came home, smiled, kissed my cheek, slipped into bed, like nothing was happening. And maybe that was the part that broke me most. Not the affair, but the performance. Like I was too dumb to notice. Like I'd stay asleep forever. But I was awake now. And the man she used to manipulate, he wasn't here anymore. She never saw it coming because she thought I was still the same man. Quiet, obedient, stupidly in love. But I had already moved out emotionally. The day I printed those photos of her and Daniel in that cheap hotel lobby was the day I stopped being hers. I didn't yell, I didn't smash things. I just left an envelope on the kitchen table. Inside it, the proof-printed emails, screenshots, hotel invoices, a list of every night she told me she was working late, with a red circle next to the lie, and a short note, "You can keep the house. I've already found peace dash." She called me 20 times, then 40. Then I started getting messages from his wife. Apparently, she didn't know either. Turns out, they had a kid, and she was more ruthless than I ever could be. She went public, legal, social media. My wife lost her job within a week. I didn't even have to lift a finger. I watched it all unfold from a friend's guest room. No celebration, no drinks, just quiet. And maybe that's the most painful revenge of all. To leave someone to sit in the mess they made, without ever raising your voice. I still think about her sometimes, about the version of her I used to love, but then I remind myself, I wasn't mourning a real person. I was mourning a lie I believed in for too long. And now, I don't have much, but I have peace. And that's something she'll never know again.